Hello and welcome to the ninth episode of Ask a DM, the show where we answer your D&D questions here live on stream. And I bring on a guest every week, and this week I have Beyond the Screen. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself for those of you who don't know who you might be?
Yes, of course. First of all, thank you so much for having me. My name is Aviad, and as you have introduced, my YouTube channel is Beyond the Screen. I do mostly GM tips, but I focus on world building and story design. My videos are helpful for GMs, no matter how new or veteran you are, but also useful for authors if you are into fantasy writing. I do some stuff about that. I create adventures and supplements for 5th edition over on Patreon and do a lot of cool projects in the area. So check me out on YouTube at slash is it this way that way Beyond the Screen RPG. That's me.
Perfect. And all of the links for all of your stuff are in the description as well. So just scroll down and have a look. And just so everyone knows, there is a little scroller going along the bottom of the screen. But if you want to ask any questions and you're watching live, just make sure to put question before whatever you type so that we know it is a question for us rather than you just talking amongst yourself. And if you're watching this after the fact, go and put some questions down in the comments as well, and then I'll get to the next week with whoever the guest is going to be next week. Cool. So we've got someone saying Master Flumph.
Yeah, we have our community over in on Discord is basically the Flumph crew. I am the Flumph Admiral. That's
Nice.
the position I'm taking, and I'm proud of it. And I have a whole crew of Flumphs, and we do a lot of positive things and help each other out. So that's how I call everyone, and it's been quite hilarious. So yeah, thank you now for joining us.
Is that your favourite monster, Flumph?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably the favorite. Is that the question that was coming up? Shoot.
It's not one of Flumphs are one of those monsters that I don't think I've ever actually used in a game, but obviously there's so much love for them, but I've never actually used them in a game.
They're so hilarious, though. They're so fluffy, and with all those tentacles and those eye stalks. And when you turn them upside down, they become stunned. That's just adorable.
It is. So we always start with some questions just about your DM style to let everyone know what sort of DM you are. So first off, do you usually homebrew or use modules?
Mostly homebrew.
Okay. Have you done any modules or just homebrew?
I've played Lost Mines of Andover and also the starter set. We actually had that on stream, but most everything, like everything else I do, is homebrew. Yeah,
it makes sense if you're a world building channel, I guess, for you to homebrew everything. And what's the highest level that you've DM'd to?
I think my current campaign is running for almost 5 years. Damn.
Oh wow!
They are level 16.
Oh, that's pretty high.
That's pretty high, yeah, and it requires a lot of homebrew to keep up with that, because high level D&D. Let me tell you that you already know that, but
you're one level away from Wish, so good luck. Cool. We've done your favorite monster already. Is there a favorite class and race as well you usually go towards?
I usually go for the wizard. And I don't have a specific. I like spells, a wizard or artificer. I like gnomes. Gnomes are hilarious. I've had a gnome artificer who would create these little bug insect constructs to to cast spells. So I had this bug beetle that would jump and then flip on its back and spin around and spew grease all over the place, and hornets that exploded and stuff like that. It was a lot of fun to kind of be creative with that.
Nice. I think with the artificer, you can get quite creative with how it looks in the game as well. So if you're a creative person, artificer can be quite a fun one to play. Cool. Okay, well, let's jump into the questions from over on Twitter. If anyone live wants to ask a question, just chuck it in the chat. So the first one is Winged Buffet, who asked, without giving too much away, what's a favourite adventure / plot hook you've wanted to give your players but haven't had the chance to?
That's a good question, and it's a difficult one. Because usually when I have ideas for hooks, it's because I want to use them in my campaign. So I just bring it in the next session. But I think that I have a hook that I really enjoy, and I want to use again for some other group in the future. So I'm gonna share that. Okay. So imagine like a low-level campaign, kind of entering the marsh. Everything is like foggy, and you see this tall, lumbering ogre who holds this stick, this very intricate-looking staff made of bones, and then he whacks a skeleton that comes after it. Now the ogre, when you encounter it, when you face it, he's not hostile towards you. He's actually pretty frustrated because kobolds have taken over his home. They've used their tunnels and tactics to drive him away, and he found this back scratching stick, which obviously summons skeletons and is necromantic in nature. But he scratches just right, so he likes to use it. Whenever he does, more undead kind of rise up and do terrible things, maybe to a nearby town. So the characters want that staff, but they can't fight an ogre because they're like level 1 or something. That would kill them. So like, we're gonna help that guy.
I like when you throw a creature or monster at them, which they instantly think is going to be bad. They think it's going to be hostile, and it's actually friendly or not hostile. That's what he's trying to do.
Kind of surprise them. It's not what you think.
I think a plot hook that I always like, or a way I always like to start an adventure, is the classic prison break. I really enjoy the prison break, so starting them in prison and then getting them to break out is a good one. I can't think of anything that I've not had the chance to do, because I think, as you said, that if I get a plot hook that I like, I usually will implement it. I haven't managed to not.
A prison break in the 5th edition game would be very interesting, I think. Like, how do you go about doing that? It's so interesting. Like, you don't have any equipment on when you start. You just have your skills, so you kind of have to give them opportunities to break out, and then more challenges on the way. It's quite interesting to see, because you can also have a variety of very different characters who would never get along, but because it's a one-shot and they're all stuck in prison, they have to cooperate. And it's now or never. So that can be fun.
Very, very true. We've got Fred from House D&D is here as well, saying hello, and he has asked a question. So, what benefits do you think guild membership should have for a player character in Dungeons & Dragons 5e?
Guild membership? I'm not sure what does that mean necessarily.
So I think it means like joining a faction or a guild in the game. What unique benefits could that give the players? So one that I've used before is magic item shops weren't readily available in the area, but if they went and joined a faction which was based around magic, they could then use the shop in that faction. So they could then get magic items, which was quite a unique way of giving them a benefit without just giving them gold.
So, as people join guilds, well, I actually have had a game ran in Sigil. It's a Planescape campaign, and we had a lot of factions going on because there's a lot of factions in is it Sigil or Sigil? I'm not sure. Let's go with Sigil. And one of my players joined the signers, and the signers, for those of you who aren't familiar, they believe that they are the center of the universe. They are a divine. Each of them is a divine being, and the world revolves around them essentially. And that belief actually grants them powers. So when one of the players joined in and was committed to joining, she went through like a rite of passage and joined in and was accepted. She received this kind of benefit, like a power that she can activate. It was like a weaker version of divine intervention that she could kind
Very
of roll
nice.
for and see if she could make a change in the world. And the change was something that's small and um, not as powerful as divine intervention, but can also stem from her belief that she can do it. So it can be a lot of interesting things. And she used it in the most hilarious way. She used it to um, so one of our Dragonborn players would have a tail because he didn't have a tail. And she's like, I want him to have a tail. And then the next morning, he woke up with one.
That's pretty shocking for him. It's like, oh, what happened? I do like giving players abilities that aren't in their class or race. It makes it feel very unique and personal if they get abilities like that, which they're not supposed to get or they wouldn't normally get just for leveling up. They get it for achieving something else. So yeah, that is a nice one as well. We got another question coming here as well by Gnome. I'm not sure if that's how you say it. Noam.
Yep.
Yeah. How do you deal with law enforcement in your games? How do you make the players feel the Town Watch or the Inquisition, or that they are acting under or outside the law?
That's a good question. So that's more of on the world building aspect there. Assuming you have your world enforcement figured out, you have your faction that is in fact law enforcing. You should think of characters that can kind of represent that faction to your players. It doesn't have to be the leader, but a character, a named character, a face, if you will, for that faction, and then look for opportunities to introduce that character. And that, first and foremost, before they do anything, before they break the law, just give them a brief introduction. Maybe the characters walk around town and see a trial, maybe an execution, with that character being present and speaking out loud. And then you could kind of weave them in whenever there is something shifty going on. So if the players are doing something illegal, then there's a chance that no one will know. But if anyone saw them, then that character would go in and go after them and will find them, unless they're being very careful. So by putting a face on the law enforcement, it's easier to bring them in further.
Yeah, definitely. I think Vallaki in Curse of Strahd doesn't officially have a law enforcement guild as such, but their burgomaster is, well, crazy really. So if you were to do anything, it wouldn't go well for you. He would send all of his lackeys after you. So that's another good way to do it. I think it's sort of down to you how much you want the law enforcement to get involved, because I've definitely put together villages or towns which have very weak law enforcement by design. So the players are actually probably one of the most powerful people in the area, and that can be quite fun as well, because depending on your players, there's a bit of moral ambiguity if they're going to do good or if they're going to take advantage of being the most powerful people as well.
Because even if they do get caught by these guards, and they are guards with the stat book of guards, the characters could dispatch a whole, they can dispatch 20 of them easy if
Yeah.
they're at least level 3, without second thought. And that could be the entire militia that the town has. So what are you going to do? Are you going to go with them because they found you, because it's the right thing to do, because it's the lawful thing to do? Or are you going to do you're going to be a criminal, you're going to run away, or you're going to kill a few of them? So
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
interesting.
In my current homebrew, there's the group called the Order, and they're very much like Iron Rule, like very, very strict laws and very strict against things. And that it is playing a big part in the story, which is why I've put them in like that, because in the long term, I'm assuming the players are going to try to overrule the leaders. So there's this quite iron rule, unfair justice sort of feel to the law enforcement. It's like, you're not a rich person, so I'm going to do whatever I want to. I guess brutality is what you'd call it, and that's sort of the theme. So that's the way I'm going with it at the moment. But that's a really good question, actually. Not many people think about the law enforcement and how to do that. So that's definitely a good question.
It's a great question.
Cool. So let's grab another one from Twitter. So Avalanche Artist 1. If you were to choose, would you rather play a game where alignment is defined and enforced, or ignored altogether?
Oh, wow. Alignment question. There's always one. Okay. So my choice is kind of simple. I don't really use alignment in my games. But that being said, I think that if you play into that idea of alignments being forces of your world, and you really play into that in more aspects than D&D does, more than just abilities and spells and magic items, you also bring it from the narrative, from the conflict that you present in your game. If you make it about that, then this can be a very cool game. If you take it into account, like from the beginning, telling them alignment is a thing in the world, it's a force that acts and is important, then that can be a very interesting take. Most often, I find that games that use alignment kind of half-ass it. That spell says that only like that item can only be used by this alignment. Why? I don't know. It says so on the stat block. Or only certain alignment can hurt, like the Rakshasa has that. Certain alignment can hurt the Rakshasa. Why? And you don't see it really anywhere else. So I'd say if you use it, then go all the way with it. But otherwise, I'd prefer just to ignore it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually, that just sort of define it from the beginning. If you want to use alignment, make it an actual part of the story and a part of the game, rather than, you're right, in 5e it's a little bit wishy-washy and a bit, sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't, sort of thing. In my games, I pretty much ignore it. I sort of view it in a different way. So I've done items that, rather than being like, you have to be good to be able to use this item, it's you have to be worthy in the eyes of Bahamut, for example. And it's pretty much the same thing mechanically. You have to be a good character, but it just puts it in a different light, puts it in a different way.
Yeah.
So that
also adds that idea that the gods are relevant and watching, and they care about the characters and what they do. So Bahamut is watching the characters and their actions. The characters can appeal perhaps to the god and try to act in ways that are in accord with the god's tenets and ways of life, and try to there's more behind that. It's not as arbitrary.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that's a tip for you. If you do still want to have items or bits that are just for good people or just for evil people, maybe link it to a god or to a higher being. I've found pretty good success with it. Anyway, cool. on to the next question. So at 2020 Gaming, over on Twitter asked, do you think of the PCs in your world as the main characters of the world? And why or why not?
So I assume it's main characters of the storyline and not world necessarily. But
I guess how I would take that is using Lord of the Rings, because it's the most known, I guess. Like the Fellowship are main characters of the world, i.e., what they're doing is going to affect the world. I assume your PCs are always going to be the main characters of the story, or it'll be a weird D&D game if you're just watching other parts.
Yes and no. It's such a it's actually. I'll tell you what I'm thinking here. So, for example, whenever the characters enter a plot whenever someone needs aid, for example, the story has already begun a lot before that. The premise has already been laid. The characters are just getting in there after the conflict has been defined. So the active characters, the factions in that storyline, have already been in conflict with each other. It's rare that the characters get in odds with someone and then the adventure springs from that. It also happens, but most cases we see that, especially with adventures published in 5e, something has already happened, someone needs help, and they go for the adventurers. So in a story sense, when we think about protagonists and we think about conflict and we think about the setting, the characters are almost irrelevant to that. They could have been replaced by any other group. It's not them that are interesting here. It's the fact that they can help that is interesting here. They get to experience solving the problem as opposed to being an active part of the conflict. That is. Does that distinction kind of make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I think that's a good way to put it. I would also add that I think low-level characters, especially, they're not the main characters of the world. But maybe by the time they get to like the 15 plus levels, then they are, because they can actually affect the world on a grand level.
I feel that with my 16th level characters. Oh my god.
Yeah. But your first level monk isn't really gonna be doing much. They're just gonna be like helping with little goblin problems and stuff like that at the beginning. But yeah, then later on they'll be maybe getting involved with politics, maybe getting involved with world-ending threats and stuff like that. So they're much more of the main character later on in the levels, I would say. I would add. So Fred has another question. So what player character level do you think it's appropriate to have a flying mount for travel, not for combat?
For travel. Okay, so going by logic of D&D spells, I guess that when you have 6th level spells, you already have access to teleport, right? So it makes sense to have that before that. Even 5th level spells, you have teleportation circle. So I'd say anything between level 7 and 10 makes sense. Like that's when I think on throwing that.
Okay, so you get fly at the spell at level 5, didn't you? So, but then I guess there's also the Aarakocra that can technically fly from level 1, and there's some other ones now as well. I think they've introduced. I think to give them a flying mount, you'd want to do that later. But I've done it before where a wizard has needed the players to be at a different place, which is quite far away. So it has loans them some giant eagles to get them there. And that works from level 1, really, from whenever you want it to. But I feel like if you give your players a flying mount, they're going to use it in combat. It doesn't matter if it's a combat-based creature or not. They're just gonna, the ranger's gonna have it, and it's just gonna fly up high and shoot arrows down. So you have to sort of keep that in mind if you're actually giving them a flying mount. So
very true.
I reckon definitely level 5 plus.
Yeah, not before that, I think.
I did I think it only lasted about 8 sessions, but I had a premise where flying mounts were like the norm. So some people were on griffins, some were on different types of birds and stuff. And that worked okay in the early levels because when they had combat with, say, goblins also had flying mounts. So it became like a flying battle, I guess.
Aerial combat to the max.
Yeah. So it works like that. But if you're going to give them a flying mount and they're probably going to be the only people that can fly, you're going to probably come into problems. So yeah, level 5 minimum, I would say. But more likely 7+, I reckon. Another question here is: are any tips and tricks for making travel interesting and fun?
Making travel interesting and fun.
Do you? I guess this is a good question to ask at this point. Do you do random roll tables ever?
So I do have I did take some inspiration from a few of these tables, but most often I try to find ideas and opportunities for discovery as characters go to it. I don't use random tables that much. I don't like it. I like choosing. So maybe I remember one time when the characters crossed a canyon, and one of them noticed there was a structure at the bottom. They went from one point to from one city to the Elven city, and that they encountered that place. And they didn't go to it immediately, but they knew that they can come back here and explore. So they just realized that it was something to discover about the world, and it's an opportunity that they could have taken, and they decided to take later. I like that kind of idea of, kind of, I think of it like as you explore an open world game with your character, and then you reach a point and there's this suddenly a quest mark appear, and because you've reached a certain point and you've unlocked certain quests. So I kind of think of it like that.
They have added, say, the party has to cross a realm and travel through a few towns, forests, and rivers to get to the destination. How do you run it? So I don't use roll tables at all, and every time I think of or put in an encounter, there's a very obvious reason I'm doing it. I.e., I want to show them that this environment is dangerous, so I'm going to throw something at them that is dangerous. Or I want to show them that this town is corrupt, so I'm going to throw an encounter that shows them that this town is corrupt. That's what I always have in the back of my head when I'm making encounters for travel. And I really enjoy. There are games like Skyrim's probably the most obvious one, where a lot of the side quests of Skyrim are more enjoyable than the main quest. And I like that idea as well. So I like to reward if they do end up exploring a different area than I expected them to. Rewards that with a good storyline in that direction as well. And you never know what it comes to. Sometimes, especially as a DM, you have to improvise on the spot.
Oh, yeah.
And it can turn into mayhem, or it can be one of the best story beats that you make. So it's hard, though, especially if you're a newer DM, I think, to make travel interesting. Especially because I think the Dungeon Master's Guide did such a bad job at explaining it.
Yeah, there's not a lot about the exploration pillar in the DMG, and and it's funny because anything that isn't combat or talking with NPCs is technically exploration. Exploration technically captures everything else, but also there's not much to it. But I really like your point about trying to take one thing and kind of emphasize it through a scene. So when a town is corrupt, they enter the town and they see like this innocent person being accused, this obviously innocent person being accused, and I don't know, executed. And they have a chance to react, or they can go away. But they've there was something interesting happening. So find these little pieces of conflict or ideas that you want to present in the world. Like you said, the world is dangerous, so a wild encounter is appropriate. And present that. I think it's a great tip for beginners.
I think another one as well is getting inspiration from media. Like the most obvious party crossing the realm is going to be Lord of the Rings. Like they have to go through Moria, then they have to go. They go through all of these different encounters, which easily could be D&D encounters, and good fun storylines as well along the way. So yeah, try and get some inspiration from media as well. I can't actually think of any other one, but Lord of the Rings, where they go on a long journey and have to travel a lot. But I'm sure there are more out there. Let me know in the comments, actually, if any comes to mind. I can't think of any off the top of my head. We've got Moran Watman as well, saying chaotic cat almost died there. I'm guessing that's to do with your encounter there.
Yeah, she's a player in my in my campaign. She went exploring.
Oh dear. Oh, at least they didn't die. Another question in from Fred here. Comment. So you use flying mounts in combat and it's likely to die first and then fall, replacing the mount be easy. That's also a very good point.
That's a valid point.
If it's not a combat-based mount, it could very much die. And that's always sad. That's a hard lesson for a low-level character to have their pet or mount die because they were reckless with it. But yeah, it definitely works. Okay, so on to the next one. So this is from Twitter at Royal Britannia. Are there any holidays in your D&D world, and do your players get to celebrate them?
So in my world, there are a few, but most notably, there's a celebration that's called Festival of Feathers, which is a bit like the Day of the Dead in Mexican culture. Dia de los Muertos, I think it's something like that, where people, it's a holiday that's dedicated to the Raven Queen, and it's said that the borders between life and death are thin in that period, and there's a huge celebration in the capital, and a lot of, I really took a lot of inspiration from there. But people put a lot of masks of crows and other, mainly crows and ravens, and wander the streets and parade and have a lot of fun. So that's something that happened during a campaign of mine. I've also had another one where the city was nearly destroyed in one other holiday. But that's that just happens.
That's always a good adventure hook, actually. There's a festival or something, like some celebration in the town, and then, I don't know, goblins attack. I think that's how the Pathfinder adventure starts, actually. There's one, Runes, I forgot the name of it, something to do with runes. And yeah, there's a
Rise of the Rune Lords, maybe?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
That's the one. I think that starts with a festival, and then goblins attack, and it goes from there. So I made a mistake when I first started DMing, where I made holidays and I actually tracked the calendar of the world. So I put the holidays into the calendar, and we played for 5 in-game years, so not real years, and didn't hit a single holiday because they were set in stone on dates. So every time there was a holiday, they were like, I don't know, off in the jungle, or they were on a ship somewhere. So they never actually got to see the celebration. So I've changed. So I don't actually track the days as much now, so that I can just decide. I fancy there being a festival actually in this part. That makes sense to the story, and then I put it in that way. So there are definitely holidays. They're just not as set in stone as I once did it. And I find that way as well, you can then tie it into real world. So for example, you could have like a snow themed festival now that is winter, and it's just a bit more fun. If that fits. It can get a bit early doing it that way. So your player also said Victory Day Massacre.
Yeah. That's the one. That's the one that the town was like, the city was nearly destroyed.
Fun, good old D&D. And then we got another question in from Fred. If the Dungeon Master Guide allowed player characters to have followers or loyal companions, how many should they have, in your opinion? It's another interesting question.
I think it depends heavily on how many players you have at the table. Because if you already have a lot of players, then adding more NPCs to combat can be quite a bit. Now I'm running a game for 8 players, and I don't want to add, like, every time I have to add an NPC, it becomes like a whole mess, because I have a lot of there's already a lot of players, a lot of initiatives to count, and then there's often a few monsters to count as well, so combat tends to drag. But I think that if you have a small group, like 3 or 4 players, then you can easily have 2 or heck, even 3 kind of followers that go around. Especially if the players control them in combat, that makes things a lot easier. I think. But yeah, that's what I think.
I don't think I would ever do followers where the DM controlled the follower, just because the DM has so much going on already when it comes to combat. So I'd always give it to the followers. I know Matthew Coville has made followers, which are very basic. It's just one card, so you can just look at it and do it, and it streamlines it a bit. I also like the idea, I've never actually done this, but I like the idea where the players end up having followers or companions that they can then send off to do their own quests. And then maybe there are some roles to see how successful they are, and maybe there's some casualties along the way, and that becomes a whole side quest. But I like the idea of them being able to command a small group of people to go do the, I guess, grunt work while the characters are dealing with the bigger stuff. So it's just like, oh, can you just go to this auction that is happening and just let me know what this person is doing, and they can go and deal with that, which is could be quite mundane, but get good information for the characters to carry on the story. I like that. I've never done it, but I probably will at some point. There you go. And Fred's just actually said in the chat.
Clarify that. I think that's also actually Fred asked earlier about joining guilds. So I think that's a great benefit for joining a guild, right? Having follow, if you're doing enough work for the guild, then eventually the guilds start working for you, and you can send followers of that guild to do some things, to help you out. So that idea I really like, and so I'd allowing them. It's not allowing them. I'm supporting that. Actually, one of my players currently, an entire faith essentially thinks she is a prophet. So she has a lot of followers. She can tell them to do all kinds of things. She didn't yet, but she could.
Yeah, I think, and then going back to the question, how many do you think they should have? I guess I would probably scale it with level, so that you don't want to give a level 1 person charge of 50 followers. That doesn't really make sense. But by the time they're level 16, like your players are now, I guess in theory they could be the head of the guild at that point, and they could have their own guild with 50, 100 plus people. But yeah, I think early levels you would only keep it to single digits, really, to start with, and then build from there. I can see it being quite a fun game, actually. That is the main focus. Like the I don't know if there might be a better system than D&D 5e to do it, though. To be fair.
I think that Colville's book, like Strongholds and Followers, have a strong system for that. Once you have a stronghold and you have a lot of features in it, then it's kind of natural to have these forces as well. Yeah, so I haven't read it fully. I've read maybe half of it, but I remember vaguely that it's mentioned in there.
Yeah, definitely. I've also only read about half of it, probably, and it seemed pretty good, to be fair. I haven't read any of the new book yet, the Kingdoms and Warfare one, but yeah, I guess if you get enough followers, you can then do Wars, which becomes a whole different game if you can be commander of a war. So, yeah, cool. Another good question. There's some good questions tonight. Okay.
Yeah, Fred's on fire tonight.
Yeah. Fred always asks the good questions. So we got Noajin LOL asked, what do you do to stop your players taking long rest after every combat?
Well, there's a lot of things we can do to inspire a sense of urgency. But if the characters believe that something is about to happen if they don't stop it, and then take a long rest despite that, then let that thing happen. Use consequences. That's like the simple one phrase: consequences for actions that they do. They take a long rest when they shouldn't. Consequences.
I think that's the biggest thing, isn't it? Urgency. Like if they don't get to the place in time, then something bad happens, or the threat of if they're taking a long rest, in the middle of a dungeon that they've not cleared out and stuff, then maybe they get attacked in the night and they don't get their long rest, and in fact they get surprised, and it's detrimental to them. And then the other thing is they're just not tired. Like if they're, they've just woken up, done 2 hours, and they're like, "Can we take a long rest?" It's just simply no, you can't. You can't take a long rest.
I mean, you can stay here and do nothing for an entire day if you want to.
Yeah,
sure.
But yeah, as you said, consequences.
Yep.
Yeah,
and also if if there's nothing dire and nothing, then let them take long rests. Who cares? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think a lot of people play 5e in the way that every long rest, every time they recharge their spells and abilities and whatnot, they're going to have one big encounter rather than like 4 small encounters with short rests in between. I feel I've seen quite a lot of people play like that, where there's one big encounter a day rather than multiple.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, so if that's how you play, then go for it. Fred also clarifying that Matt Coville stuff is based on D&D First Edition as well, so the short answer follows.
I believe you, Fred. I haven't played First Edition, but I believe you.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so if you are liking this video, if you could give it a like, it just helps it get shown to more people who might want their questions answered in the following week. So I'd very much appreciate it. It's just down below us somewhere. Not sure where. Okay, the next question. Do you watch any D&D live play streams?
I've watched the entire campaign 1 and 2 of Critical Role.
Are you up to date on campaign 3 as well?
I have not watched anything from campaign 3, but I've seen some spoilers, I've seen characters, I've seen all sorts of stuff. I've watched a bit of High Rollers for a while, but I didn't get far into that. They mentioned 20 stuff are hilarious. So I watched like a Escape from the Blood Keep. Oh my god, Brennan is such an amazing dungeon master. Wow. He is hilarious. He has a hilarious crew over there. Highly recommend it if you haven't watched it. I think the first few episodes are on YouTube. It's just a blast. You're gonna have fun. If you haven't, I envy you that you can watch it again.
Yeah, I actually haven't watched the Dimension 20. I've seen it quite a few times, and a lot of people rave about it, but I've never got around to giving it a go. So I'll have to give that one a go. The other one I haven't tried that a lot of people rave about is the Dungeon Dudes one. I think it's called Drakheim or something like that. Dungeon of Drakheim. Apparently that's really good as well, but I've never watched that. And then I've also watched Critical Role and High Rollers, and Dice Camera Action is the other one with Chris Perkins. as the DM. It's another good one as well. But yeah, there's quite a lot out there now. So a lot for people to choose from. Right, on to the next Twitter question. So Grimm's Park Press asked, do you think adjusting enemies' abilities features is cheating? And should you only use what the book says 100% of the time? That's an interesting
I almost never use what the book says. Like I always tweak things and change things and adjust things. Sometimes even on the fly, if it will become underwhelming. Like if everything everyone just dies in the first round of combat because they need 10 more hit points, then maybe they have 10 more hit points. It's fine. I'm trying not to do it like in an overt, again, being against the players kind of way. But I think that as long as it creates a good story and promotes an interesting encounter, that's what's important, really, not what the rules say. The first rule in the Dungeon Master's Guide is that you can change the rules and do whatever.
Yeah, I think it's dependent on your game, I guess, how much you care about this stuff. But I'm in the same boat as you. That story is always going to trump the stats and that. So I'm the same. I will on the fly just change stuff if I think it would be a better story beat. I try not to fudge dice rolls because I like having dice rolls impact the story, but I might change stuff on the fly. Like if a combat is just really boring because the creature has a lot of hit points but not much else going, I'll just half the hit points on the fly just to have the combat end and maybe put the damage up a bit to compensate. But I definitely wouldn't say it's cheating, unless you're in Adventures League or stuff. I guess you have to then do it by the book, but
cheating kind of assumes there's a winner, isn't it? I think. I don't know. That it just doesn't work that way in the way I at least play D&D.
Yeah, so as I said, I think if you're playing story first and stuff like that doesn't really matter, does it? So as long as everyone is enjoying themselves and you're doing a collaborative story at the table, it doesn't really matter if you're changing abilities and features, I don't think. Okay, so we've got another question from Fred. So, what multiverse or world-traveling vehicles or magic items would you allow higher level characters to have, which is prevalent? There's Spider-Man coming out next week where they break the multiverse, so I guess it makes sense answering this question. I personally have never done any sort of world-traveling or time traveling aspects of my games.
I'm very careful with time traveling. Yeah.
So the only time I've done a multiverse thing, it was like a fun one shot. So it's different. I had my characters play themselves, my players play themselves. So as if they had been teleported into a fantasy world. So I guess that's technically a multiversal thing.
Yeah, I guess it is. I had a Planescape game, so I had a lot of portals going on. What I did with that is I gave the characters a ritual that allows them to find gateways to Sigil. So if they're anywhere in the universe and they want to get back to the city, they can find the nearest gateway. It may take them a while to get there, but they know where it is. But as for high-level characters, I mean, I'd give them a ship that can plane shift. That's cool. I've played in an adventure where we had a functioning Nautolid that we salvaged from like old Mind Flayer wreckage, which was very, very cool. Like trying to understand how to make it work was very difficult, and we did we made a lot of mistakes as we tried to make it work. So we kind of earned it once we figured it out.
I think, so first there was a comment saying that my mic wasn't great. And I realised that I was indeed using the wrong mic. So hopefully it's better now. It's been wrong for the whole stream so far. So,
But hopefully it is better now. If you could let me know, Pulsar, if it sounds better, that would be great. I actually really want to do a game which is heavily based around world traveling, and that I've not done anything like that so far. So I think it would be really interesting to have like nautiloids and have spaceships really, and some sci-fi elements in there. I think magic items wise, I would be quite happy for just plane shift type stuff. You get plane shift as a spell, obviously. So I guess if you could teleport to another plane in a second, why wouldn't you be able to teleport to another world in a second? Maybe. So I would be completely fine with that. I guess it depends what you want your game to be, though, because with world traveling, there could be a lot of adventures on the way. Like look at the Star Wars and stuff like that. So depends if you want that to be the focus of your game. Okay, it looks like my mic is better. That's slightly annoying. I had it the wrong one the whole time, but that's my own fault for not testing it first off, I guess. But yeah, cool. Okay, on to the next question. So, Dice Collectors asks, how do you go about picking your characters' names? Do you use any online generators, or do you just pluck them out of your head, or
like for NPCs, I'm mostly pluck them out of my head. I have a table that I kind of scratch sometimes, but I don't use it as often. Most of the time, I just make them up, and sometimes they sound ridiculous, and that's okay because it happens.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't really think too much about them because I know, going back to Matt Coville, I remember him watching one of his videos where whenever he picks a name, there's always meaning behind it. So it'll be like a Latin word, or it'll be like an old ancient Greek name or something like that, and he'll actually think, so this person's from this area, so they should have this type of name and all this stuff. And I'm the complete opposite. I just go random generator, and then like dwarf names, and then I'll just pick one that I like the sound of. So I don't get that deep into it.
I do have some regions of the world that I draw inspiration from certain cultures, so I try to kind of take names from that culture into these sessions. So if I have like one of my countries is based off of kind of not necessarily French culture, but they all speak in the French accent, and I gave them French names. So I go with that. But yeah, going into the depth of every meaning of every name is intense. That's pretty cool, actually. I go I do that with when I play player characters, then I really think about the name. But when like with NPCs, nah.
Just whatever comes to your head. I like it. Okay, so we got New Master Nate is asking you, what's something you've done in a campaign that your players found the most engaging? Is there any story that comes to mind?
Wow. I think that yeah, there's a lot to pick from. I think honestly and surprisingly, the players were most engaged where the combat stakes were highest when player characters died. So we had this okay, this is deep. Are you ready?
Strap in. I've got my drink.
Okay, so one devil in the 8th layer of Beator managed to create a machine that would snatch souls from creatures in the material plane, whether they sinned or not. So it doesn't matter whether the gods deemed them worthy of going there or not. They would just take them away. And he did that because he had an artifact that he got from the players. So it kind of consequences. So so then a lot of people began to, like, when they died, they went to hell, and a lot of mystical powers were losing their shit. And the Raven Queen, who was very unhappy with the entire situation, because she gets to decide who lives and like who goes where. It's like her entire job, in my world at least. She gets to look and decide. Was very not happy, and she sent the characters there. So they had to infiltrate the 8th layer of hell into this maze of ice and infernal machines. And when they reached the end of this underground structure, they encountered that very, very powerful devil, who locked them in this chamber with arcane glyphs, so they couldn't teleport away, and they had to fight him there after they fought the entire way in. And this was a very, very terrifying encounter, and they had to give up on 2 party members so they wouldn't all die. It was
Oh wow.
I didn't expect it to be as deadly. But we reached that point in the campaign when I was like, if I'm pulling my punches now, then no character is ever going to die. I have to, at some point say this is dangerous. They did something dangerous. There could be consequences. I shouldn't save them just because I love the characters. So they managed to get into the machine, snatch the item from the machine, which allowed them to bypass their ruins around the room, and they couldn't reach everyone. They reached everyone but 2 members, and plane shifted out.
Oh wow! So they literally just left them. That's a big old decision, that is.
Yeah, it was intense. It was insane.
That sounds like a good game, though. Sounds like a good game to play in.
Thanks. I had a blast playing that game.
I find my players find it the most engaging when their backstory is involved. I feel like because they have taken the time to sort of write their own story or their own character story, they like it when they get the positive vibes of their creation being involved in the game. So I've always found that is the sort of best points of the campaign, is when something in someone's backstory comes into it and becomes a big part of the story, and they're more invested. I feel like if you're you're talking about a hag that is stealing children in a village in a swamp far from here, go sort it out. Yeah, they'll go do it because they want to play D&D and they know that is bad and they want to go stop it. But then if it's a devil has put your sister into slavery,
and the stakes are a lot higher.
Yeah. Then
it's
they're
like those
much more
buttons
invested.
I like it that like backstory is like essentially you give your DM knives, you give them ammunition, then they can just poke you into caring about plot. Like
yeah,
there's something that there's a bad guy, and also poke he has your sister, or she has your sister, and good luck. Now you have to care about it.
Much more invested. So, well, I guess that's a pretty good tip actually for new DMs. If there's any new DMs watching this, get your players' backstories involved if you're finding that your players aren't really engaged in the story.
Powerful weapons. Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to be wrapping up soon, but we've got 2 more questions in the chat that I would like to get through. So another one from Fred here. So what flying mounts would you allow in your game if it was appropriate? Going back to the flying mounts.
Flying mounts. I would allow a lot of them, actually. Like, obviously, things like giant eagles and griffins and Pegasi, I guess.
Would you allow a dragon?
If they're high enough level, yes.
Okay.
Or maybe if it's a young dragon and they're level 10 or 11, that's also fine. Probably wyverns before dragons, I'd say.
I think for me, I would view a mount as not intelligent, i.e., the players can control it. So control it in the same way you control a pet, I guess, as in you can build rapport and then get it to do what you want it to do. Whereas I'd view dragons as too intelligent, that they wouldn't be someone's mount. Like they might let you fly in their back once to get to a place or in a specific war or something like that. But I couldn't envision my players just having a pet dragon that sleeps out in the stables and then they go and like mount it and then fly off. But that could, although saying that could be quite an interesting story. But actually, if your players have, I don't know, some sort of necklace that they've put on the dragon to make it under their control, and now they've got a dragon under the control, and maybe
under the control is also a mechanical thing. They can be an ally, an NPC otherwise, so they have to maintain that kind of connection with them and appease them and make sure they're aligned with their interests, so they can use them mechanically. So with intelligent mounts, that's definitely something to think about. That's a good point.
Yeah. Cool. And then we're going to end on this final question. So, what are some of your favorite ridiculous magic items? And then it says mine is a potion of thirst quenching, which makes perfect sense.
So there's I've got a few. There's bell of invisibility. As long as you ring the bell, you're invisible.
Yeah, I know that one.
A ring of teleportation, but that ring teleports. What else? I'm taking these, by the way, from one of my players had a one shot, and he had this merchant who sold like ridiculous magic items. So he had an item that's called bigger knife, and essentially, whenever you draw it, it would adjust to be bigger than any other knife in the room. It would be just 1 inch longer than any other knife in the room.
Nice, I like it. There was the one in Critical Role Campaign 2 as well, the Wand of Smiles, that just makes someone smile as well, which is quite a fun one. Yeah, I can't think of any that I've used that are completely ridiculous. Oh, I had one actually. I guess this isn't ridiculous, but it's a cloak. It was a cursed item, and it was a cloak of elven kind, so it made you better at stealth. But if you ever put the hood up, your head would disappear. It would become invisible, so you'd look like a headless horseman style thing. And there was a curse, so they had to go on like a little mini mission to get it's the ranger that ended up wearing it, and then put the hood up and ended up losing their head. And they had to go on a little mini mission to get it uncursed, which was quite fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
Love it.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for coming and chatting. Would you like to let everyone know where they can find you? Everything is down in the description, but do you want to just let everyone know quick?
Yep, you can find me on Beyond the Screen on YouTube. You can find the link here below again. Also creating adventures and D&D 5e supplements over on Patreon, so you can go and check it out. There's some freebies over there if you haven't seen it. And that's it. That's where you can find me. Thank you for having me, Shrike. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been really great chat, and there's been some very good questions. Fred, as always, with the good questions. So thank you for coming, and thank you for bearing with my microphone. I will make sure to double, triple check next time before I go live that I have the right microphone selected for the next time. So thanks everyone for coming, and we will be back next week. And then the week after that, we won't be here because it is Christmas. Yay. So yeah, happy Christmas. So, but I will be here next week. So come by and say hi and get your questions answered. Thank you everyone for coming. I'll see you later.